Okay, there we got 50 of them resized. So what we would do next is, what I like to do is I like to clean my cases after I've done all my case preparation and all my case work. You want to pay special attention to these primer pockets. So that's the next thing we're going to show you how to do here. And it's good to keep your stuff halfway organized so you're not confused where everything is. Okay. So, after you have everything, these are now resized. They're down to the, they've been squished back down to the normal size, and the primer's gone. But you'll notice if you look closely in this primer pocket hole, there's carbon buildup in there. Can you see that, kind of? Alright, try to get close. There's primer buildup in there. And what we need to use is this little tool, primer pocket cleaner. This little deal is going to go inside that hole and clean that gunk out of there. Now this is very, very important here. If you don't have very consistent primer seating, like the exact same pressure and stuff for each primer, that can affect the burn dynamics extremely, okay? Because that primer is what initiates the rest of that powder going off. If you got one a little bit crooked or one with a different tension, you have one with a leak around it or something like that, that could totally change the dynamics of how your charge lights off and how quickly it starts to go off. So your pressure curve could vary a huge amount. So you want your primers to be exactly, or as consistent as possible. So one thing you can do is remove the carbon and make sure everything's true. So I'm just going to go through each one of these with this tool. About like that. And you want to establish a rhythm when you're doing this. You don't want to go to town on one and then kind of not, so I'm going to give it like a couple spins. 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of deal. And you can do as needed, but you just want to make sure you get that stuff out of there. You want to make sure you're square up in there. And you want to do basically each one the same. Consistency is the key to any of this stuff. So you don't want to like work on one for 5 minutes straight and then just give one spin on the other one. Just make sure you get the carbon out. We can also use the primer pocket uniformer like we showed earlier. A lot of guys skip this step, and this is actually very important. Also, when you're doing this, you want to inspect the flash hole, which is the little hole going through on the inside of the primer pocket, the little hole in there. Because some cases, you'll notice some of the cheaper brands, like PMC, I've run into it a lot, or some of those, the flash hole might not be centered in that primer pocket. It might be kind of off to one side, whereas the rest of them are centered. That will make a big difference too. So you want to set stuff like that aside. You want to do your own quality control. Things to watch out for that'll keep you consistent in the long run. After this, the thing we're going to want to check next is our length. As we go through these cases and resize them, they tend to stretch, and through firing too. They'll stretch. So we'll go through and make sure these are all the right length. And then that will conclude our case preparation, and then we can go ahead and polish these up. A lot of guys argue when's the best time to polish this. I usually do it after that, so they get any kind of trimming, like brass, if I did any trimming or de-chamfering or anything like that. You get all that residue out of the case before you load it up, because you don't want brass shavings mixed in with your propellant when you fire. That's not going to be very good. So I like to polish after all my case prep is done. And you do have to fight with getting polishing media out of the flash holes, because it will get stuck in that primer pocket. So you might have to do this again, but it's actually worth it. Also, the media will get in this primer pocket if you remove most of the carbon, and it will do a pretty good job getting it consistent and getting it polished down without too much mechanical disturbance inside that primer pocket. Okay. Next thing we're going to want to do with our case prep is make sure that our cases are not too long. After firing and after sizing, these things stretch out, and if it gets too long, what can happen is when you put a bullet in here and get it all ready to go and you load it in the chamber, if this mouth is too long, it'll get stuck in that forcing cone a little early, and as you chamber it, you'll feel it's kind of a heavy, like you got to pull down on the bolt kind of hard. And what's happening is this is getting pinched in there, and it's actually crimping it down tighter as you lock it into place as it goes forward that last tiny amount of space. And that will spike your pressure real bad. And you can actually increase the pressures to a dangerous level by having two cases too long. And also, if you experience like a real heavy bolt lift after firing, or when you're chambering around, if it's real stiff going in, there's possibly you have a case length issue, and hopefully you've remediated that before that happens. If you're feeling problems, you know, chambering around, that's kind of late in the game to be finding that out. So what we're going to do is most loading manuals will have this criteria listed out here, but we're looking for the case maximum case length. Now, COL is cartridge overall length. That's the length of the entire cartridge. That's not what we're looking for right now. We're just looking for just the case. And the maximum case length for the 243 is this right here, 2.045. Okay? And the length that we can trim to is 0.035. So we're going to use this tool here, and we're going to see what kind of length we got going on. You're going to want to set it on there. Make sure you got it squared up. It takes a little bit of practice if you've never used one of these before. Like this. And to read them is a little interesting too. We have 1 inch, 2 inch, so this is in caliber, right? So we're looking at, this is not metric here, but we have 2.0, because we're not quite to the 1 there yet, 4. We're right under the maximum case length. And that's the first one I measured. So that might be an indicator we might want to trim these. Let's do another one. Okay. This is 4.6. So the maximum was 0.045, right? So this is over max. And even if it's that much over, you probably, if you're bordering on that line, you want to go through and check all these, or just go ahead and trim all of them, just to make sure. This one is 0.47. So these aren't running long. So this could be a problem. This can spike your pressure. So let's just go ahead and we'll probably trim these. I just want to get an idea of where we're sitting. Yeah, they're consistently too long. Okay. So let's put this away, and I'll show you one of the easy ways to trim. There's a lot of different ways a guy can trim, and this is probably the cheapest and easiest way to go. It's made by Lee, and what you do is you get this, where's the deal? This cutting tool. It's a case trimmer, a hand case trimmer, okay? And what you do is you buy this case length gauge and shell holder, okay? This is for a 375 H&H MIG. It comes with a little shell holder and a little insert, and I'll show you how to do that. So let me find the 243 caliber one here. That's 243 right there. So here's the insert for 243. That screws into your cutting tool, and you want to screw it all the way in. Make sure it's bottomed out. If it's not bottomed out, it'll screw in as you go, and that will actually change your length you want. Now this is a one size kind of deal. This will trim it to one length. You don't have an adjustable length when you're using these, but it still works pretty good. Okay? And then it'll come with the little shell holder in here as well. So here's the shell holder and how that works. This little shell holder you're going to screw on. This tool goes in the end of a drill, like I'll show you in a minute. And the shell holder goes in here like so, okay? And then our case will fit inside here. We'll simply tighten. And you want to make sure it's seated all the way back, or it ain't going to really tighten too good. Now you can either have this screwed in here, and here's the idea, okay? This inserts in here. This is going to bottom out in the primer pocket, or in the flash hole. And then you just push in and turn until you can't turn no more, and it's trimming off some material there. Okay? You can see kind of a shiny edge. It did trim some off, just a tiny bit. Then we can loosen that up, and that's trimmed. Okay? We'll put that in a separate trim pile for now. This is kind of intended for a power drill, so I'll show you how that works. This can be a pain in the butt if you... Sometimes these Lee tools they're very inexpensive and they're very handy and I like them, but sometimes they're not to the proper specs. If that happens to you, you have to write them a letter and say, hey buddy, get your stuff in the proper specs. And they'll send you a new piece. I've had that before. But so now we got it attached in the drill here. I'm going to put that in. Going to want to make sure it's nice and tight in there. Okay, so we're going to turn that. Okay. And then you can just go like so. Put the steel in there like that. Give her a little spin. And I don't know if you can see, but there's the shiny edge there. Not all the way around, but it was starting to get longer on that side. This side wasn't too long. So that's how the brass gets extruded over time. Sometimes it's not even all the way around the circumference of the mouth. So once you kind of get the rhythm going here, it's pretty easy to do. That one trimmed a little bit. Loosen it up, put it over here. This little guy in there, like so. This is actually a pretty quick and easy way to trim, and it's relatively safe. Some of the desk-mounted trimmers, they have like a little Allen screw to hold your adjustment, and if that thing gets loose over time and you're trimming, a lot of guys don't notice, but all of a sudden, like, it moved, and, oh, thank you. And, see, I'm visiting again. That's not going to be very good, is it? Good thing she's sitting right here. But, you don't want these things, you don't want your length to be moving around, because that, like I said before, you want consistency. That's a nice thing about this little setup, is it gives you pretty good consistency, because there's just one size it trims to. So we'll go through and we'll do this to all of them, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so one thing also, after you're done trimming these, you're going to have sharp jagged edges on these mouths. So you're going to want to deburr those. And I'm using this tool here. It's got a cutter on both sides. This is for the inside of the mouth right here. And the inside is for the outside. So like this. You got a sharp corner right there. And the trick is to do this consistently. Give it the same amount of spins for each case if you can. And now I'm doing the inside here like this. You can do it by hand like I'm showing you now. Or, I'll show you one more. And like I said, consistency is the key with these. You don't want to go to town to one on one and not do the other ones relatively the same way. Or preferably, if you're smart and efficient, you can do it right immediately after trimming. So let's do another trim job here. Okay, so I pull that out. Now we'll just go like this. Now you're not going to want to mix like I just did. If you do them by hand, you want to do them all by hand. If you do them by the drill, you want to do them all by the drill. Consistency is the key, but I'm showing you how to do it. So let's do another one. Let's trim it. And then while it's there, we'll go ahead and dechamfer it. Doesn't take much. Just a little bit. And I'm not really pressing that hard either. You just need to get the sharp corner off. You don't want to like make a knife's edge blade. You're not trying to sharpen the case mouth or anything like that. You're just trying to deburr it. So, let's do another one. Now you'll notice some will have more material removed than others. Some of these are longer than other ones. So, and this is another reason, I don't know if you notice how dirty my fingers are getting here. Just from handling these cases with lube on them. But there's a lot of grime on these things, running them up into the die and doing all this prep work. And now we're getting metal shavings inside the case. So if I would have polished these before I would have done my resizing only, if I wouldn't tumble these in the tumbler, I'd have a lot of metal shavings inside my case when I load, and that's not going to be very good. Another thing that's real important for trimming here, especially if you're going to be using cannular bullets that you're going to crimp, if you have cases that vary in length, you're going to have a total different amount of crimp each time you ram each case into the die there. If you have a long one, it's going to crimp a lot harder, and if you have a short one, it ain't going to crimp at all. So if you're running like a semi-auto, or bullets with cannulars, a little groove on the side of the bullet that is designed to have a little rifle crimp, You're definitely going to want to make sure all your cases are exactly the same length. Because if they're not, that's going to be real bad. You're going to have even worse problems there. So, like for AR-10s and stuff, where you're using bullets with crimps, it might be wise to go ahead and at least measure each case, or just go ahead and trim all to the exact same length each time you load, just to be sure that you get consistent crimps. Again, it might not make a significant difference for shooting at 100 yards, but you will have enough of a pressure difference to where you could experience like a significant variation in your velocities, which can translate to a big problem way down range. So, something you want to be aware of for sure. Bullets without cannulas, if you're not going to be crimping, if you're just using like some of the match VLDs or these AMAXs, for example, I'm not even going to put a crimp on these. So it's not going to be as critical in those respects, but you still will have issues if your case is too long. Like we said before, due to getting it stuck in that chamber there with too long of a neck getting jammed up in the forcing cone. And that could be a bad situation as well. So make a note of that deal too.
I know.
Last one. And some of these were longer than other ones, so it feels good that I went through and made them all the same length. Okay, now our case work is mostly done on these guys. Like I said, we do have a lot of the case lube on there. And even if these things were clean when you started, now that we have the lube on them and we just trimmed them, and we got little brass shavings guaranteed inside these cases, you're going to want to just run these through the tumbler again to polish that stuff out of there. So let's go ahead and throw these in here. I like to use the walnut media that's treated. That seems to work pretty good. Corn cob media is not as aggressive, so they need more chemicals with that. Sometimes you have to use an additive like a brass polishing additive. But some of the walnut media is so aggressive you don't even need to add any chemical to it. So that's usually what I use. And how long do you turn it on, do you ask? Well, that depends on how nasty they are. These are actually pretty clean because I do clean them every time. So I don't have long ways to go. Basically, I'm just going to go until I get that lube off of them. So probably not that long. Just keep an eye on them. Maybe 45 minutes, an hour. If you got really dirty cases sometimes, you might have to let them go for a few hours. And it depends also, obviously, on how cast your media is. This stuff does wear out. The little microscopic corners on the media gets rounded off. So it kind of loses its abrasiveness over time. So if you got old worn out media, go ahead and replace it. Or if it's soiled already, it's going to take longer to clean. So it's an as needed kind of deal. Okay, if you overfill these, they're not going to cycle through very well. So I usually, for a rifle, 50 to 100 at a time, depending on what size deal you got going on. So we'll let those polish up, and we'll come back and we'll empty them out, and we'll get on with the rest of it.